When discussing trade networks in world history, Afro-Eurasia often dominates the conversation. The Silk Road, weaving connections between Europe and South and East Asia, usually takes center stage, leaving the impression that long-distance trading in the Americas was almost non-existent until European colonization after 1500. Unlike Eurasia, where major civilizations often flourished along rivers that supported expansive trade systems, the largest states in the Americas, like the Aztec and Inca empires, were based in inland regions. These areas were far from major waterways, and the lack of domesticated pack animals, apart from the llamas and camelids of the Andes, further constrained their ability to develop expansive trade routes. However, major rivers like the Mississippi and the Amazon still played critical roles, acting as natural highways for commerce and cultural exchange across vast distances. The absence of early riverine civilizations like those of Egypt, which fueled maritime trade in the Mediterranean and Red Sea, also limited the scale of seafaring in the Americas. Maritime activity remained largely coastal and small-scale. Despite these challenges, pre-Columbian societies devised remarkably innovative systems to connect their diverse regions. The vertical economies of Andean South America and Mesoamerica linked the high mountains to tropical lowlands, while Mississippi and North America facilitated continent-wide exchanges, demonstrating the adaptability and complexity of these ancient trade networks. Our understanding of pre-Columbian trade routes relies heavily on archaeology, in contrast to the more textually based knowledge available for many other ancient societies around the world. Archaeologists piece together these networks by studying the distribution of raw materials and finished goods, tracing them back to their sources of origin. This process involves analyzing artifact styles or examining the mineral, organic, or other properties of materials to link them to specific resource areas. In some cases, archaeologists also map ancient roads, such as the highly sophisticated network built by the Incas. While a written record exists for certain Mesoamerican societies, it provides limited insight into economic activities. These texts primarily focus on political and religious themes, offering only occasional glimpses into trade and commerce, such as the Aztec tribute rolls or Maya murals that might depict market vendors. It is only with the arrival of Europeans in the late 15th century that written accounts begin to detail the region's economies more comprehensively. 16th century letters, memoirs, and reports from Spanish conquistadors and friars, often compiled with the help of native scribes and translators, offer valuable historical sources. These texts shed light on the Caribbean, southern United States, Mesoamerica, Central America, and Andean South America. Pre-Columbian road systems stretched across many regions of the Americas. Yet the extent to which they were used for trade remains a subject of debate. In some cases, roads that cut straight through mountainous terrain or dense rainforests may have served purposes beyond practicality. Their design suggests religious or symbolic functions, such as facilitating pilgrimages or visually linking communities in a more ceremonial sense. For example, the desert roads associated with Chaco Canyon in New Mexico and Nazca in Peru appear to reflect these spiritual or symbolic roles. Similarly, the elevated causeways constructed by both Amazonian peoples and the Maya highlight their ingenuity. The Maya, in particular, built their famed white roads from limestone and lime plaster, with some stretching an impressive 100 kilometers across the Yucatan Peninsula. Although these roads had strong symbolic and sacred dimensions, they likely also played a practical role in fostering connections between distant communities. They served as conduits for trade and reciprocal exchange, weaving together the economic and cultural fabric of the region. In the great empires of the Aztecs and Incas, roads were indispensable for both military movements and commerce. While the Aztecs invested minimally in road infrastructure, the Incas developed a remarkably advanced system. Their roads were often paved and integrated with bridges, creating an interconnected network that spanned roughly 40,000 kilometers. These imperial networks were not created in isolation, but built upon earlier traditions. Civilizations like the Olmec in Mexico and the Chavin in Peru had already established exchange systems defined by distinctive artistic styles. Later, states and smaller empires, such as the Toltec and Teotihuacan in Mexico and the Wari and Tiwanaku in Peru and Bolivia, laid the groundwork by formalizing road systems. These early innovations set the stage for the expansive and complex networks of the Aztec and Inca empires, showcasing the enduring significance of roads in the pre-Columbian Americas. In North America, formal roads are less prominent in the archaeological record compared to other regions, particularly outside the Chacoan cultural sphere. The pre-Columbian trade routes of the Midwest and other temperate areas remain elusive, partly because they were often simple dirt paths that have long since been reclaimed by dense vegetation. These ephemeral trails leave little trace, making them harder to study than the monumental road systems of other civilizations. Trade in this region, however, undeniably thrived along the major rivers of the mid-continent. The Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio, and St. Lawrence rivers, along with others, served as vital arteries for the movement of goods and people. In the Northwest, rivers like the Columbia and Fraser similarly supported commerce, with watercraft playing a key role. Alongside these waterways, footpaths running parallel to the rivers connected communities and allowed for overland trade. In the plains and prairies, trade routes often followed the natural tracks created by migrating buffalo. These buffalo traces were well-worn pathways that facilitated movement across vast open landscapes. Later, these same trails would be adopted by Anglo-American pioneers heading westward, underscoring their enduring utility and significance as connectors of people, goods, and cultures in pre-Columbian North America. Two cultural spheres of the North American Midwest, the Hopewell and Cahokia, are particularly notable for their extensive trade networks. The Hopewell sphere, centered in southern Ohio and Illinois, boasted connections that stretched across much of the continental United States. The Hopewell people traded for a wide array of materials, acquiring marine shells from the Gulf of Mexico, sheet mica from the Appalachian Mountains, copper from the Great Lakes, and even obsidian and grizzly bear teeth from as far away as the Rocky Mountains, an impressive 1,930 kilometers to the west. Later, as Mexican maize became a staple crop, the Mississippian trading system began to thrive. This network was centered in the fertile alluvial lands of the American Bottom, with Cahokia as its hub. Much like the modern city of St. Louis, which became known as the Gateway to the West, Cahokia was strategically located near the confluence of the Missouri, Illinois, and Mississippi rivers, where prairie and woodland ecosystems met. This prime location enabled the Cahokians to establish trade connections that spanned vast distances, from Wisconsin to the Gulf of Mexico in a north-south direction, and from the Atlantic seaboard to Oklahoma in an east-west direction. The far-reaching scope of Cahokia's influence is particularly evident in the distribution of chunky stones, specialized tools used in a popular sport involving the hurling of javelins at rolling stone discs. Made from a unique quartzite found in the Cahokia region, these stones have been discovered across the Midwest, Southeast, and Plains, reflecting the vast cultural and economic reach of Cahokia's trade network. These exchanges not only spread goods, but also shared traditions and ideas, underscoring the complexity of these pre-Columbian societies. Long-distance trade was a well-established practice in Mesoamerica, deeply embedded in its cultural and economic systems. Many Mesoamerican traditions recognized a deity dedicated to merchants and trade routes, known in Nahuatl, the Aztec language, as Yacacutli. Among the Aztecs, professional merchants known as Pocteca undertook extensive trading expeditions, often carrying items of low bulk but high value. Their goods included jade, turquoise, precious metals, feathers from tropical birds, and cacao, all of which traversed vast distances across the region. One fascinating example of Mesoamerican trade involves their exchanges with the ancestral Puebloans of the American Southwest, despite being separated by 1,930 kilometers of rugged terrain and desert. The Puebloans provided turquoise, which was highly valued in Mesoamerica and often crafted into intricate mosaic inlays for masks and other ceremonial adornments. In return, they received tropical birds, depicted in Puebloan pottery and wall paintings, and cacao, which was used to make a chocolate beverage. The discovery of theobromine residues in cylindrical vessels from Chaco Canyon has only recently confirmed the consumption of cacao in this region. Historical accounts from 16th-century Spanish chroniclers suggest that desert-dwelling peoples of northwest Mexico played an intermediary role in facilitating this trade. This network linked Mesoamerica with the Casas Grandes cultural sphere, which flourished about a century earlier. Such a system was so efficient that when the Aztecs conquered southern Mexico and gained access to established turquoise acquisition routes, they did not attempt to secure the material directly from the source. Instead, they required tribute from the regions that already operated within this extensive trade network, leveraging its strength rather than disrupting it. This strategy highlights the sophistication and interconnectedness of Mesoamerican commerce. The arrival of European colonizers marked a dramatic upheaval in the pre-Columbian trade systems that had long connected indigenous communities across the Americas. Diseases brought by Europeans devastated indigenous populations, leading to a collapse in the social and economic networks that had sustained trade. Survivors were often forcibly integrated into the colonial economy, which reoriented trade toward European interests. Where pre-Columbian trade had emphasized reciprocal exchange and the movement of culturally significant goods, the colonial system imposed a model focused on exploitation. Indigenous trade routes were supplanted by new networks centered on European goods and the extraction of raw materials. This shift not only disrupted existing economic systems, but also eroded the social and cultural bonds that had been integral to indigenous commerce. What had once been a diverse and interconnected web of exchange was transformed into a mechanism for colonial profit, fundamentally altering the landscape of trade in the Americas.